Legacy is beyond a bloodline or a last name. Legacy is purpose and destiny, and we all have the ability to live that.
Hey friends, welcome to the Purpose Beyond Motherhood podcast. Together, we are using our voices to walk alongside women navigating infertility and motherhood. I'm Holly, and I'm so happy you're tuning in today.
Hey friends, and I'm Nicole. Let me tell you a little bit about 1212 Ministries and why this podcast exists. 1212 Ministries creates a safe space for emotional restoration, physical healing, and spiritual discipleship for women who have or are experiencing infertility. We want to share hope in the hard things and encourage you to be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer.
Our heart behind this podcast is to make sure that no woman walks this journey alone.
Welcome to the Purpose Beyond Motherhood podcast. Hey friends, it's Nicole and Holly and our special guest, BonnieRuth. We have an important special episode for you today. So I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're tuning in. Yes. You are definitely going to want to share this, subscribe, do all of the things because BonnieRuth is here. I want to say she's in the building, but she
brings the heat.
Yes. Brings the heat.
She brings something.
She brings the heat.
And so, you guys, before we were recording, we were just reminiscing about all of our times together. And Holly, will you please share that story really quick about how our first kind of introduction to BonnieRuth and
Yes, I sure will. BonnieRuth spoke at one of our Refined events. It was a few years ago. And she pulled up clips from Creed and incorporated that, the battle of infertility, the battle of your mind, all of that. It was so good, but I can literally see the clip in my head. Like when I think of BonnieRuth, I think of Creed now.
Yes.
It's my favorite movie. One punch, one step, one round at a time.
Yes.
That is so good. So good.
I'm so glad you liked it. I was just telling them back to that story that I was like, well, they're either going to invite me back again or it's my last time to ever be with 1212 bringing in Creed to an infertility women's event. But it was fun. It's my favorite. And whenever I think of what women are going through, couples are going through as they're navigating infertility or miscarriage or childlessness, it really is. It's like a boxing round. And so for Jason and I, we actually look at each other probably on a regular basis. And we just say that, like one punch, one step, one round at a time.
Good.
So.
Yeah, so good. BonnieRuth, I'm so grateful for you. You guys, let me tell you a little bit, just some history, because there is just something so important about community. I will always say it. There's something just about linking arms with other women, other organizations, as a ministry for 1212, we don't have all of the answers. We don't know it all. And it's just a privilege to link arms with other ministries and women. And BonnieRuth has just been so kind to just be she's my girl, man. It's so beautiful. And it's like, we're in this thing together. We always I always text her and I'm like, today is hard. Ministry is hard, and she'll do the same. But it's been so cool just to see our partnership as organizations just grow from that one time that you spoke at Refined. You were on the panel for Refined. BonnieRuth has also been on the podcast before. We had a really great conversation about intimacy and infertility. So you guys have to.
And you invited me back. I am just saying. I guess I'm not doing too bad.
You can do no wrong here.
No wrong. And then just BonnieRuth, she has a podcast too called Barren Not Broken. And then she and her husband have a beautiful couples ministry walking through infertility, baby loss, and childlessness called Legacy Place. And so BonnieRuth, really quick, just for our listeners that are maybe meeting you for the first time, do you mind just kind of sharing just a little bit about your story and just
Yeah,
all
for
the
sure.
things.
Well, thank you, ladies, for having me. Like Nicole said, we do consider ourselves partners and friends. And, you ladies are in the trenches with people who are hurting. And so we need each other. So thank you for including me in your pack, your crew, your peeps. And I just think it's a beautiful relationship that we have. And I'm so honored to call you friends and to be a part of 1212. Okay, my story. Okay, so I am 43. And my husband, Jason, and I have been married for 22 years, and 19 of those years we battled infertility, miscarriage, chronic health issues. And as anyone who's listening who's gone through anything like that, you can imagine 19 years, there's a whole lot in there. And it would take like a million podcasts to break that down. But there was a lot of surgeries, a lot of doctor appointments, a lot of disappointment, a lot of questions and not understanding. But it led us to, so my chronic health issues that I've battled, honestly, this is something I've not shared even on my podcast, but for some reason, when I was thinking about today, I feel like I'm supposed to share it. I started my cycle when I was 8 years old. And so by the time I got into high school, I was fully into endometriosis, which at the time nobody knew what that was. By the time I was in college, I was having debilitating cycles. The solution was only birth control. And I'm so thankful for my mom, because back then there wasn't really, I'm old enough to say back then, I just have to pause and say that. Back then, there wasn't what there is today. There wasn't the knowledge around endometriosis or even birth control, really. It was just like the fix-all, be-all. And my mom just had the forethought to just not have me do that as a teenager. And then as I got old enough to make that decision, I just leaned into that. And because we knew it wasn't a cure, like there's no way that was going to fix what was happening. So long story short, we got married. I did go on birth control because, of course, you don't want to have kids right away. You want to have fun being married. But I had bad reactions to that, went off of it, and basically just spent the next 19 years trying to figure out like what was wrong with me. So endometriosis, PCOS, fibroids, and then a gamut of just treatments and medications and things like that. So by the time we came to 2020, which was about 19 years in, we just felt like it was time to make some hard decisions. And so I had a hysterectomy in 2020, of all the freaking years to have a hysterectomy. Can I just point that out? But we couldn't go any longer. My body had bullied me enough. So we made the decision to have a hysterectomy. I say made the decision. It felt forced. It felt like a decision we were forced to make. So there was a lot of grief and a lot of hard conversations around that. Made that decision. And in that decision, I think we came to a place for the first time in our lives where we had to rediscover us as a couple. We had to rediscover our dreams. And we had to define what legacy looked like for us. And so we had to let ourselves sit in the pit for like a year and to grieve and be sad and not know what to do with ourselves. And then we picked ourselves up and we were just like, okay, now it's time. So we went from a black hole to a beautiful blank canvas, and we've just been trying to navigate how to let God paint on that canvas. And so for us, that led us into, the ministry that we're doing now with Legacy Place, but really just navigating as a couple. I think for us, coming out of it married, coming out of it loving each other, coming out of it with purpose and hope, I will say, I feel like is our greatest accomplishment in life. Because we lost a lot of battles, going back to the Creed example, like we lost a lot of rounds, but we're the champions of our own story and we've won. And so just helping couples navigate how to win in spite of the battles and the rounds that they've lost. So that's as short as I could get it.
That's so good. That is so good. I loved all of that.
Thank you.
I know. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of things make Legacy Place so special and unique, but I love that you guys pour into the couple, because we, even just as 1212 Ministries, we hear a lot is like, what is for the men?
Yeah.
What do you guys have for the
Totally.
men? And so I just think that it's a beautiful space where couples can come together and be able to just open the line of communication and just like work through the hard things.
Yeah. And that's really what it's about. I mean, since we're there, I'll just, with Legacy Place, it's multi-layered, but we are working to build an actual retreat place in Bonham, Texas, which is in Northeast Texas, about an hour and a half outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And we're building cabins and activities that couples can come out and do on site. But in the meantime, we're doing one-day events and we're working on curriculum for couples. We get asked, just in the last 7 days, I've been asked 7 times, do you have any curriculum? Because there isn't anything out there for couples. If it was a woman, I know right where to send them, 1212. And so there's a lot of organizations that are focusing on us as women. And that's very important because we are going through it in a layer and in a depth in which the men are not. However, we cannot go through this by ourselves. So having something for couples is so important. And it's not readily available. And we just hope to fill that gap a little bit and partner with, organizations like you guys to just fill the hole and then to uplift what you're doing, because it has to work together. We are a holistic perspective when we come together. So,
That's so good. I love that you said that you guys had to redefine what legacy looks like, because I think there can be such an emphasis on that and just the familial perspective. But I love that you guys are building something that will continue for generations.
Yes.
Although that's not like a child with a last name, it is a ministry and a movement of God. And I love that.
Thank you. That's really what we believe. Like I tell Nicole all the time, like legacy is beyond a bloodline or a last name.
Amen.
Legacy is purpose and destiny. And we all have the ability to live that. Like there's not one person that doesn't have purpose and destiny on the inside of them.
Yes.
And so it's reminding that those couples are that together first, regardless of if they have children or not. And then I think it's also remembering that as we build legacy, we are constantly having the freedom to define that. And Jason and I believe that our legacy is going to live in the legacy and bloodlines of other families.
Yes.
And so that's what we're determined and focused and living the charge for. So.
Yeah. That's such an eternal perspective on something that I think it's easy to get stuck in like the day to day, when really like the call in our lives is really to bring honor and others to the Lord. And that's exactly what you're doing.
Amen. That's good. That's good, Holly.
So
Thank
cool.
You.
Okay. BonnieRuth. So, you said 19 years of infertility. And so I'm sure people just said some crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Crazy.
You should have written a book of these, man.
I could, let me tell you.
I think maybe you should.
You could have a weird coffee table book right there, let me tell you.
Seriously.
Yeah. And we're giggling right now, but we know that, some comments can be really insensitive.
And not funny.
Not funny at all. And so I just, through our conversations, like I just have heard you just share so much wisdom in how to respond to people when they ask those really tough questions or those uncomfortable questions.
Yeah.
And even before we started recording, like you just like dropped a bomb on us. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, I wish that I would have known that. And the first one is just like, and it's just us as a culture that we just think that we have to say, how many kids do you have?
Yes.
Yeah.
How many kids do you have? And so it's just like, what are just some other things? Like, how can we respond? Or what are some other questions that we can start to say?
Yeah. So just to respond to that first thing is I try really hard, and I say that because I'm not perfect and I do this incorrectly sometimes, but I really try to educate the people in my world that I have equity and quality and capacity with, that don't ask people, tell me how many kids you have, or how many kids do you have, or do you have children? tell me about your family.
So good.
And that is such an open-ended freedom question. Freedom in the sense that I can answer that however I want. And so for me, my answer is always going to be, well, I'm married to my husband, Jason, for 22 years, and I have 3 awesome nephews that I am the best aunt to. And so I can answer that in a way that is lighthearted, but I'm also saying I don't have kids without having to say that. And so, because then it just gets awkward. So just educating people in our lives, like how to ask those questions better in society. And even saying like, that also allows you to not ask, are you married? Because for somebody who's single, that can be a sensitive question, and we negate how that feels to people. And so we have labeled those to be get to know you questions, but I actually think that if you don't know that person, you actually don't have the equity with them to even ask that. But as society, we've labeled them as appropriate get to know you questions when we should be thinking broader because we haven't entered that space of intimacy with them yet. So saying like, tell me about your family allows a single person or a single mom, right? Like, or a woman or a couple who are trying to conceive to answer that in a way that is safe for them. So that would be my first little thing. I think the other thing that, and I starting with this like educating piece and advocating piece, because we can just shift society one person, one conversation at a time, right? One punch, one step, one round at a time.
Yeah, girl.
One person, one conversation at a time. Because it's overwhelming otherwise. And I think Holly was saying before we hit record, like people are well-meaning, but they're uneducated and they're unaware. And I take it upon myself to kindly make them aware. And so I can start with the people that are in my life, you know, my family, my friends. You know, I've talked about with my friends who have kids, you know, there are times where I've said like, hey, when you ask me to your kid's birthday party, you know, maybe don't attach me to the entire Evite. Just text me so that I have time to process or whatever it might be. So it's just being broader and learning to be more aware on how a question could affect someone. And I think as a society, we just, if I can say it, we kind of suck at that. And so I think it's just us learning and growing as human beings who care about other people ultimately. So yeah, that would be my first response to that. And then one of the things that Nicole was laughing with me about the other day was I was saying like, okay, when people come and say, why don't you adopt? Jason, I still get this question. I need to like have a tattoo that says I'm not adopting. But I'm not doing that because adoption, here's the thing that those people do not understand. First of all, adoption is beautiful. And there is something about it that's indescribable, but it's also a very intense process. And when you have someone who's been going through infertility treatments or has had, I just met somebody the other day, they have had 5 miscarriages in 2 years. 5 miscarriages in 2 years. You do not need to be asking that person why they don't just adopt because what they've already been through is so layered. And adopting is a very long, very intense, very intricate process. And here's what people don't get. Adoption involves a child that needs the right parents, that needs to have parents that are called and anointed and appointed to be their parents. And if I just, at a whim, to fix a desire in my own heart, decide to adopt just because everyone's asking me and it's the thing to do, I feel that that's disrespectful to the child. I feel it's disrespectful to the legacy in which I'm trying to build because it may not be the right fit. And so, so all that, I lay the groundwork, all that to say, when someone says that to me, I have a few responses, and it depends on the sassiness level in which I'm at on that day.
I like it.
And that's okay. Like, let me say this too real quick. I think that we don't permission people enough to respond as bluntly as to the person who's asking the blunt question.
Yeah.
Amen.
Bluntness can still be done in kindness. Let's just throw that out there.
I like that.
However,
I need that.
like bluntness can still be kind, but boundaries sometimes have to be blunt. And it's okay to set a verbal boundary with someone who has crossed over into a space in which they have no right to be in and asking me about my family planning. There are very few people that should be in that space. Mm-hmm. So people listening, family members listening, don't ask some of these questions. Like, let them share with you in their own time.
Yes.
But when people ask me, like, why don't you just adopt? I typically will respond, well, adoption is a very big thing to consider. And I just lay it out because my 5-minute answer may not be what they wanted, but they asked the question. So guess what? They get the 5-minute answer. So I just tell them, like, it's a layered thing and it involves another child. And so I'm not going to pursue something until I know that I'm supposed to pursue that. Or it might be a simpler thing in that is just not something that we feel we are in a place to navigate right now. And that might sound really selfish, okay, because the way we've been trained in our minds and our culture, but it's actually the most unselfish thing that you can do. Yeah. If you are not in a place to pursue that or navigate that, it is not selfish. It's actually very empowering. And so it's just being, that's like shorter version when I'm less sassy. And then I think too, it's saying, hey, you know what? I appreciate that question, but that can be a really hard question for someone like me. Because what you don't understand is there's a lot of things that you can't see. And so could you just be more mindful when you're asking that question to people? And that might be somebody who is a little bit closer, and I do have the ability. It's not the person in line at Target or at the nail salon or the dentist that I've been going to for 10 years, and they're like, why don't you have kids? But it might be more of that person that's a little bit closer, the family member, right? The great aunt, the grandpa, the sister-in-law who got pregnant 4 times already and doesn't understand why you're not just like doing something and fixing it. And so adoption is not a fix. That's another reply. Adoption actually isn't a fix to my infertility. So those are some on that topic.
That popped in my brain so much while you're talking about adoption, because I think people view it is so serious, like you're saying, so layered. But I think people that don't know infertility think it's like the Band-Aid on the bullet hole of infertility. And I'm like, if God has called you to it, absolutely walk.
Yes.
If he hasn't, do not force yourself in there. Like, that's not a place to, no. And also, like, another thing that we've got to remember is infertility is actually a medical issue. And people don't know that. So in our education and our responses, it's okay to tell them, like, hey, adoption and infertility actually have nothing to do with each other. They're not the same. One should not affect the other. Because there's people who have kids who have adopted, right? I have friends that they have 4 kids and they also have adopted 2. That had nothing to do with infertility or filling a void or becoming parents because they couldn't become. And so realizing that they actually have nothing to do with each other, and we need to help people see them as separate things.
Yeah.
That's good. That's so good.
What are some of the other questions that people have asked you that you can help us with our response?
Or any advice? If you have any advice.
I was going to say, can it be comments?
Yeah.
Like,
yes, yeah.
Okay, so I'll tell some like lighter ones, but I'm going to lead into a big thing that we deal with in the church culture. I know, Nicole, when you invite me out to anything, there's no filter. So one of the funny things, it's not funny, but I get asked all the time, like, well, have you tried acupuncture? I get asked that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, first of all, random. And second of all, like, why is my medical decisions even being discussed by any other human being that I didn't invite in? So if it's anything medical, like, have you tried IVF? Have you tried IUI? Have you tried Clomid? Have you tried blah, blah, blah? Typically my like out of the gate response is, hey, you know what? I'm not really comfortable talking about my medical decisions. Thank you for asking. No.
Yeah.
It just popped in my mind to be like, you're actually not listed on my HIPAA form.
Exactly.
Bye.
You are not on my emergency contact
No.
form.
Right.
So it's just like, why do we think that we have permission to like enter these spaces with people that we don't know if they haven't invited? So then, or again, SAS level or person who it is, I'll say something like, hey, you know what? That's not really a question that I discuss with anyone outside of my family.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're teaching that person for the next person, and hopefully they're not going to ask another person the same dumb question.
Yeah.
So I've tried to frame my questions that's not just about me. And in this community, I kind of get slammed a little bit of that I bend towards this thing of like educating and advocating. And some people feel like I'm going through enough, like I shouldn't have to educate people on how to be better at this. And I get that. Like there are days where I'm just like, I don't even have time for you. I don't have the capacity to deal with you. Like you're annoying, you're mean, you're rude, you're completely unaware. Like I have all of those feelings. But I think I've just taken the stance that like if I'll help, I can change another person. Hopefully I can change someone else from ever having to face that question from that person again.
Yep.
And so I don't think this is for everybody to take it up as a cause like I have, but I do think for yourself, like being reminded that you have the freedom to do that. And so that's one. The medical thing, just please don't enter my medical space. The other thing that I've gotten asked is, have you gone to counseling? Again, not anyone's business. So I say this because I am very pro counseling. So I'll be like, you know what?
Yeah.
I love counseling, but that's not something that I will discuss outside of my marriage. And so I just want you to know that like you might not want to ask somebody that in the future. So it's just you're seeing a thread and like some of it might sound like repeat, but I think it's worth us just keep repeating so that we can learn together today that so can I lead into the more serious?
Yes.
Okay. So our churches, the local church is a beautiful gift that God gave us. I am pro local church. My whole entire actual real job is supporting local churches. So I am pro local church. I love pastors and leaders. But sadly, this is an area in which we are not educated and we are not knowing how to pastor well. And so, there are some that are doing what they know and what they can, and I want to honor that. But we have got to help people in church understand that our faith and our fertility are not the same thing.
That's good.
Our faith is how we navigate what we're going through in any area of our life. But our level of faith and how we navigate our faith is not what dictates our fertility. Now, that may just screw up some people's theology. I believe God's healer. I believe that he is faithful and just to complete his work in our life.
Yes.
However, we live in a fallen world, and so we have to find this ability to navigate this faith culture that we are in and navigate our own decision of choosing faith and salvation and who God is in our life. And no one in church actually gets to tell us what that should look like in regards to our fertility. So this gives somebody a list of scriptures, I just had somebody do this to me. First of all, I guess they didn't realize I had a hysterectomy. I've had this quite a bit lately where like people were like praying for me to have kids and I'm like, whoa, we gotta catch up here. I can't have children. I have nothing to allow. So this person did not realize, gave me this whole list of healing scriptures. Sweetest lady, meant the best thing. But we should always ask permission before we give somebody something in regards to our faith.
Yeah.
And so, hey, would you be interested in a list of scriptures that I have created for healing and people who might be going through discouragement? Would you like that? No, actually, I don't. I don't want it.
No, thank you.
I have a list of awesome scriptures that I believe God's given me. Thank you so much for offering. It's okay to say no to somebody else's, to how they navigate their faith. It's also okay to be open to learning from other people. Every story matters. Our faith story matters. I'm trying to wrap this up, I promise, ladies, because I could be on this soapbox for a really long time. But when pastors, leaders, people in churches ask permission to pray for someone, to give them a word, to encourage them, to offer any sort of anything before you do it, because they may not be in a place where they can receive it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And so if you are someone who's not in a place to receive someone else's faith offering, is what I call it, then you can say that. You can say, you know what, could we circle back around this conversation? I'm so thankful for your heart for us in this area, but it's not something that I want to engage right now.
It's good.
Or maybe it's just even more simple and you're like, I'm not in a place to receive it.
Yeah.
So if I'm ready, I'll come back. Right? So it's asking permission for those who want to give an encouragement word, scripture, prayer, whatever. And then for those who are not in a good place, if you are in a good place, still set a boundary around it. So you can say something like, hey, you know what? Why don't you email or text that to me so that I have the ability to process it in the way that the Lord would want me to?
Good.
Or could you email that or text that to me so that I can have a sacred space to navigate that? Because as well-meaning as you might be, there might be things in it that I'm not ready for, and I'd like to take that in by myself or with my husband. So it's still setting a boundary around what someone might be offering you. Because Jason and I, we've been called up on stage. We've had people give us cards and prophetic words. And to be honest with you, it's something that I'm still wrestling with the Lord on some of it. But what I have to remind myself is there's humanity that is offering it. It's someone in their humanness offering something that they believe, that they stand on, and out of care.
Yes.
And so I have to remember that attached to their humanness is only seeing in part and hearing in part. And so I cannot attach God to their humanness. So I have to go to God and say, God, what do you want to say to me out of this situation? Because that was really hard. Yeah. Or because I'm struggling with what they said. And how can they say that? Or how could they even get that in their heart or their spirit and it not be from you? But like, how do I believe that? We could go into like a cycle. Yeah. So like, just understand that God and our humanness, we can't combine them when people are offering something to us, but we also do not have to receive it.
This is so, like, it's so many things. I want to write all of this down, but I love that I don't feel like current church, but if you've been in church your whole life, you were raised as a woman to like receive, I don't know, feedback from biblical leaders and not question it. Or like, and I love that you're empowering our listeners to take it to the Lord and not think that it's automatically like signed, sealed, delivered because a pastor told you. Like, they're still a person and they're still hearing from the Lord, but you still have to filter that through what you hear him saying. So there's so many helpful things in there. Thank you so much.
Oh, I hope so. I could go on that one for a long time, so I'll just leave it at that.
It's just the empowerment factor. And like, you are, yes, I had people say things to me that I wish I would have had all the things you were saying to just run them through and well-intentioned,
same girl,
like not helpful.
Not helpful.
No, thank you.
Yeah. And here's what I would say, like, empower yourself, listeners, to send this episode to people who may not be getting it.
Yep.
And remember that if they're not getting it, then, and if they don't get it and they don't engage in this, then it might be time for a boundary around that relationship, even if it's someone you love deeply. Yeah. And, we had a family member that is of the older generation, few generations ahead of me. Amazing woman, had some similar things in her day that I've dealt with physically. And I cannot tell you how many times I got advice and I was like, seriously, I cannot, like, and not helpful and like frustrated at me that I wasn't like engaging these things. And so I just finally had to be honest and say, like, hey, it's hurtful to me when you keep bringing this up. I hear you. Thank you. Thank you for caring. But please don't address this topic with me anymore. And there's a risk. There's a risk in being honest like that, Nicole. Yeah. And I think that's why this conversation is important, because it's realizing that it's the fear of losing, and you've already lost so much that what you're going through is a loss. And so the fear is, I don't want to lose something else or make something else hard for somebody else. And the reality is, like, it's not a loss if it keeps causing damage. And we have to permission ourselves to realize that these are funny things in hindsight, but in the moment, it can literally crush somebody. And so share it with those who, even if it's not just like a problem person, but a person that is navigating this with you, like, share it with them so they can share it and they can help other people. Yeah.
So good.
So good. I know.
So many
BonnieRuth,
things.
thank you. I know. Thank you so much. Will you tell everybody really quick, like, how they can find you online?
Yes. Okay. So you can find me at Barren Not Broken on Instagram or Facebook for the podcast. And I do a little bit of social blogging, I guess. I don't know what it's called nowadays. There. I write a lot of thoughts there. And then at Legacy Place Retreat for Facebook and Instagram for what we're doing with couples and helping them navigate this. And it's legacyplaceretreat.com. Info at legacyplaceretreat.com if you want to reach out and you're looking for something to help you and your spouse. Yeah.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much. You
Thank
shared
you,
so many golden nuggets with us today.
Thank you. I hope so. I'm like reminding myself too. I think we have to remind ourselves, you know. Yes. So thank y'all. I'm so honored, so thankful for you being in the trenches and what you do every day to help people and to help these women. And it's no small thing, because I didn't have this. I did not have this, and I would have given anything for this. I barely had people who could relate. And so please don't take what you do as small, or the trenches and the battles that you face as you navigate. I just want to say thank you for being in the trenches for people who are hurting. It's huge, it's needed, and I'm so grateful for you both. So
absolutely. We love you.
Yeah. Love y'all.